Welcome to Pete's Property Podcast, brought to you by Buyers and hosted by Pete Wargent, buyer's agent, finance and real estate expert, and all-round property guru, plus published author. Join Pete for 30 minutes as he chats all things property with a new guest each week. Learn practical tips from the movers and shakers in the property industry and well-known personalities sharing their property journeys.
G'day, welcome to this week's episode of the Pete Wargent Property Pod. I'm delighted today to have a special guest on the podcast, Michael Murray from Byron Bay Property Search. Michael, welcome. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It's a pleasure.
It's been such an interesting couple of years for a lot of Australia's coastal markets. So Byron Bay or Byron Property Search is a property buyer's agency. You're based up in Byron Bay, of course. So that's for advice. If you're looking at buying property in Byron or the Northern Rivers region, and whether you're a buyer or a seller, it pays to have an experienced professional in your corner. So the principal, Michael Murray, who joins us today, has got over 20 years of experience as a buyer's agent and 35 years living and working in the region. So very deep local knowledge and hundreds of satisfied clients. So, Michael, you'd love to talk about property. You could talk under wet cement, as you say. So tell us a bit about your background first and your career, and then we'll come on to talk a little bit about what's been happening in the coastal markets.
Yeah, sure. Pleasure. So I moved to Byron Bay in the mid-'80s. Three of us chipped in 50 grand and bought an acreage at Possum Creek for 150 grand. We just couldn't stretch a little bit further for a beach house at Watergoes, which at that time was 165. To give you in, put you in that, extrapolate that out. The last two sales in Watergoes Beach were around 22 mil. So the capital gain in that market has been, let's just say, extreme. So at that time, I was working as a documentary producer, and I thought I had the ideal lifestyle. I was based here in Byron and would go off to exotic locations and do shoots and come back to our home in Possum shoot and edit. And but then in late about 99, 2000, I got a really bad case of chronic fatigue, Ross River fever, and that high pressure lifestyle I was living was no longer viable for me. And coincidentally, at that time, lots of people were calling me up, mainly in the arts, saying, because during that time I was buying and selling and renovating, because I'm an architecture student dropout. So I've always had a fascination with property and renovation and building. So over that time, as well as running my documentary producer career, I was also buying and selling and renovating. And so it seemed that people would ring me and ask me, "Carl, we're moving up. Can you help us?" And I had no idea that there was even such a thing called a buyer's agent. I mean, at that time, I think there would have been less than 20 buyer's agents around. You didn't need a license. You could just hang up a shingle. So I started since I couldn't travel or work in that business. Also, that business was kind of collapsing with the new innovations of digital cameras. Anybody could go off and shoot a film coming out of those film schools. So I said, I'm a buyer's agent. And ever since then, I've been working very consistently and full on as a property buyer's agent and enjoying it.
Yes, an interesting choice of career, and it gets you out and about. When I was, I remember going to Byron Bay as a backpacker in the 1990s, but I certainly wasn't around 35 years ago. I think I was still toddling around at junior school. What was Byron like as a destination back in those days? What was it that drew you to the region?
Look, it was mainly, this was probably one of the first exodus from the city pushes that were on. And at that time, it was really the beauty of the location and the cheap real estate, unlike these days. So, we probably couldn't afford in the city. My partner at the time and I, we wanted to get away, and we had friends up here, so we thought we'd give it a shot. At that time, very, very different location, very different town. It was still very agricultural. The Norco dairy was still running. The meatworks had only just shut down in '83, and at that time, before it was a meatworks, it was a whale processing centre. So Byron at that time was still very much an old-fashioned town with, people riding their bikes and horses through the town wearing blue singlets and things. So it was not the hipster location that we see today by a long shot.
Yeah, so from memory, it was more sort of hippie than hipster back in those days. I remember the sort of the backpackers and people smoking and all of that stuff. But I mean, obviously these days Byron Bay has become known globally as it's a magnificent destination. I think the most easterly point on the Australian mainland, and obviously fabulous beaches and strip of coastline. What is it? What is it that makes Byron so good as a destination? Because I remember years ago they used to say Bondi had kind of become famous just for being famous, and Byron seems a bit the same. Everyone seems to be drawn there these days. What do you think it is that makes Byron so special?
Well, I'm probably biased, but and I would like to think of a place where I prefer to live around the world, and I keep racking my brain, but I can never think of it. And I think it's just mainly the combination of the beauty of the natural landscape, and also which is still vibrant today, that you have all of the attributes of city life, but in the country. So you have great culture and restaurants and cafe and people, and it's a very, very strong community, but you're not stuck in traffic. Sometimes you're stuck in traffic. You don't have a lot of the disadvantages of living in the city, of seeming to having to pedal hard just to keep your head above water. So you can have a very relaxed, interesting lifestyle without having to put up with some of the inconveniences that the city has.
Yeah, I think the very similar to what we experienced living in Noosa. I guess the lifestyle and the landscape and the natural environment is fantastic. The climate is very good. I think certainly in the past couple of years, there's been a real acceleration in people with flexible working arrangements or the ability to work from home. And clearly not as many people now are tied to the city chicken coop office spaces that they used to be. Now, you cover not only Byron, but also the Northern Rivers region. So what does that, for people who aren't familiar with the region, I drove through myself back in January and it just seems to get better and better. But what kind of other areas do you cover, I guess, from Tweed Heads and Ballina? But do you also cover areas like Grafton or Lismore and Casino and so on?
Yeah, so look, my main stomping ground is Ballina the Tweed and out to Casino, Kyogle, so Lismore. But, over 50-60% of my business is actually done in the postcodes 2479 to 2483, which is basically Lennox Head to Ocean Shores, Mullumbimby, Bangalore, Brunswick Heads. So that's the intense area where there's a lot of demand. But I also travel outside of the Shire. I do Yamba quite a bit. Yamba, if anything, has the mantle of the next Byron Bay. And I'm always seeing, this is the next Byron Bay. It seems to be something, a label they'd like to put on, the next up-and-coming coastal town. But Yamba is certainly a interesting and a place that has the potential. After you, and one that's been bantered around a lot as well is 1770 as the next Byron Bay. That kind of is also quite common. But, I've done quite a few purchases in Yamba for people, and I can see that it's got the potential still of very popular town with lots of growth potential.
Yeah, one of the popular strategies in real estate, I guess, always was to look at the markets that have boomed and then try and see where that boom might be replicated next, almost like a ripple effect. And
yes,
as you say, there are some coastal markets in Queensland that are a little bit the same. But having said that, many of them have already taken off over the past couple of years. Before we talk a little bit about how you can buy well in those coastal markets that you cover, let's talk about some of the risks, because I guess in Queensland we get a lot of interstate buyers, and obviously they've got a different legal framework, a different land tax system now in Queensland, and I suppose some other traps that people who are living locally might not fall into. But if you're buying from, say, Sydney or Melbourne, you might not be familiar with some of the different challenges and risks. Now, I remember earlier in the year we had 3 weeks in Noosa where it rained literally day and night, and obviously that's been an issue further down the coast as well. So are there areas that are flood prone in those postcodes that you cover, and what do you sort of what do buyers need to do in terms of due diligence to make sure they don't get picked up in some of those areas?
Well, this is a huge topic. We could spend the rest of the conversation on that, but I'll just be very, very brief. Yes, Mullumbimby was very much affected, and parts of Ocean Shores, South Golden Beach, not as badly as Lismore. Lismore was going through the turmoil of trying to decide whether to move their whole CBD to a higher area. And, that there's still repercussions and debate and controversy going on about that. Of course, there's been probably a 30% pullback in places that were hit by the flood. This flood was 2.5 meters higher than any flood we've ever had before. So, that popular word at the moment, unprecedented. So that's probably going to get worse with climate change. So there's some, but wherever there's problems, there's opportunities. I think towns in Lismore, not so much Lismore, but Mullumbimby has still got some livability potential, and there's capacity there to take some of these really beautiful old wooden houses and raise them a metre and still get quite a bit of usage from them. South Golden Beach is a really popular area that was hit hard as well. That's also have a lot of raised houses. So, but the real crunch, where the rubber hits the road, is insurance. And, I think some people are going to be hit going forward with, because some banks are finding difficulty in insuring places if you can't insure a place, you can't finance it. So that's really going to be an issue going forward. We're also seeing places with an insurance bill, because it's not that you can't insure it, it's just how much. So some of these properties are getting like 20, 30 grand a year insurance bill, which kind of makes the purchase or the rental of them pretty untenable. Just briefly on that, I think that there, as I mentioned already, by raising houses, there is some potential, and lots of people are looking at, reconditioning houses to make them not flood friendly, but flood resilient. And I think that's going to be a business, and there's potential there for some low-cost purchasing to be in the area and try to overcome the challenges of ongoing flooding.
Do you want to save on buyer's agent fees? You could save thousands with Buyers Buyers. As Australia's most extensive network of buyer's agents, we can lock in highly competitive prices. Plus, our national network of buyer's agents are some of the best in the business. So get the Buyers Buyers advantage and talk to us today. Call 1-800-975-051 or visit buyersbuyers.com.au.
There are certainly areas in southeast Queensland too that flood fairly regularly. I saw the Reserve Bank of Australia put out a technical paper a while ago talking about potentially maybe 5% of dwellings at risk of flooding, but potentially without worsening with more extreme climate events. And then there's the debate about future development. I suppose the one risk you just need to, cover off, because you mentioned there the insurance policies. It could become a bit of a self-fulfilling downward spiral for sort of some markets. If people can't get insurance or the insurance is too dear, then obviously future buyers are going to be limited. Well, let's talk about actually buying well. Now, it's been a very difficult couple of years in some of those markets. Stock levels have been extraordinarily low with all of the demand from people buying from interstate or relocating from interstate. So how do you, as a local buyer's agent, how do you get an edge on the market and help people to buy well?
Look, I have to be upfront, and I am upfront with my clients coming into the Byron market when it's a very overheated market. I tell clients, I can't get you a bargain, I can't get you a deal, I can get you something. And it's quite common that I'm often telling a client, look, this property is value. I would value it 2.3, but you're going to have to pay 2.5 to get it. Are you prepared for that? Because, for many, for especially the last 2 years up until February, and for many years even prior to that, 4 out of 5 of my deals going through would have competitive bidding. So, and the agents kind of got canny there, listing at market rate or slightly below market, because they know they're going to get the best price, not by getting buyers to pony up to a high price, but getting people, competitive bidders in through the funnel and having them fight against each other, and then they're getting the best price with their vendor, because when people are emotionally attached, they tend to pay more. So where I earn my fee a lot for a buyer is getting them ahead of the chase, more or less, getting them ahead of the pack and getting a property purchase negotiated and wrapped up before that flurry of interest and competition heats up. So that's where it is. So I'm very wary of buyers coming to me. I want to buy in Byron Shire, but I want to get a bargain. I'm always say, well, good luck. But I'm maybe not your man, because you have to be realistic here. So to give you an idea of the chart, the trend line in Byron, we kind of had a tanking like everybody did March, April, May of 2020 when the COVID hit. And we saw a kind of a major constriction happening. But as soon as that kind of passed and we had the potential of people working from home and leaving the city, we had 2 years where basically the median house price doubled in Byron Shire. We are now sitting at a median house price in 2481 of around 3.1, which is, much more, $1 million higher than Sydney's median price. So we have the highest median house price in Australia and probably one of the world. So it's not a place to come in where we're at now, which has its pluses and minuses. Byron is more or less on par with some of the most prestigious property markets in the world, like Palm Beach or some of the eastern suburbs of Sydney, southern suburbs of Melbourne. People call us the Santa Barbara of Australia or tropical Monaco, and I don't see that changing. So when you have a blue chip real estate market like we have here, sure, it's a hefty buy-in price, but usually in the topsy-turvy world, like we're having now in a pullback, we'll probably pull back median house price only 5%. And already I'm seeing that the market, we've had just one of those short windows of a few months where you actually could get a bargain in Byron Bay. There are a few distressed sales going on, and I've witnessed a few of them, people that are having to sell into this falling market. But, it kind of feels like it's warming up again now already as we're going into spring. So there's only very small windows in a place like Byron Bay where, good buying is easy and there's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, you kind of preempted my next question, because every time I pick up the newspaper, reading about all this sort of doom and gloom and the cash rate target, the time of speaking has gone from pretty much 0 to 2.35%, and it may well head towards 3, I guess, over the months ahead. But I guess for somebody who's been in the region for 35 years, you've probably seen some much higher rates over the years. Obviously, there's been a little bit of an impact in Byron, but maybe not so much. What about if somebody has a lower budget as an investor or somebody moving to the region? Are there more affordable markets they could look at? And does anybody buy things like units and townhouses around the Northern Rivers region, or is it mainly people looking at detached housing?
Yes. If you're looking for a buy, yes, I kind of try to veer people away from, because the Northern Rivers lifestyle dream of a small acreage, outside one of our prestigious villages is kind of really high, still highly competitive and always will be. But, you can go out west, there's still good buying in some of the next tier villages like Alton, Dorrabee, Dunoon, Billynudgel, places further north, anywhere between Ocean Shores and Tweed Heads is still some good buying, but where the demand is still in a small acreage with a little bit of a view. So whenever that comes up, that's good, and it sometimes looks good online, but once you go and visit, you can sometimes see. That's why a buyer's agent, if you're not in the area, is sometimes essential, because what you see online is markedly different than what you see when you're actually there. But, small cottages, small houses in one of those villages is better, because once you take the heat off trying to get a small acreage and end up with a block, a house on a block, then there's more capacity, there's more options, because you're not fighting against another dozen people with a small rural acreage.
When I'm reading in the media, I keep reading about celebrities in the region and Hollywood A-listers jetting in and out, even through the period when us mere mortals weren't allowed to. If I was to, and you're somebody who's observed the gentrification and changes over several decades. If we were to project forward for the region and the outlook, if we were to come back in, say, 10 or 20 years' time, what do you think might have changed? Or do you just think it's just an ongoing upwards trajectory for Byron and the Northern Rivers?
Yeah, to put bluntly, yes, I just think it's an ongoing trajectory, because I don't know, and it's possible that there's, and there's always dangers, but if you were to use the expression of, killing the vibe here, and that's possible to do, but unlikely. People are very protective and defensive of the community and the ecology and the environment here. So I don't see that kind of falling under quickly. But, I suppose to speak negatively, there is a downside to popularity. You call something paradise and kiss it goodbye. And there's a bit of that now. And I from being here this long and watching the changes and many pushes and waves of popularity and where it's got to now, the danger that I see that could be happening is, you say that the interest rates are rising. That's not affecting this market at all. The majority of incoming buyers are cash buyers here, and agents even if I'm acting for a client and they have to get finance or even a bank val before settling, I have to handle it quite differently, because the agents basically are going, if you're subject to finance, you're at the back of the queue. So that's really not an issue here. But what is an issue, I feel, is that, over the many years I've been doing this, the clients that have been coming in are all kind of Byron Bay simpatico, I suppose. They want to go to farmers markets, they want to walk on the beach, they want to keep the environment as it is, and they want to join, different community organizations and get involved in everything. There is a danger that this kind of level of finance that's coming to town are kind of not so prioritizing that to a certain extent. We're seeing buyers that have a property portfolio and they're picking up something to put for land banking or property banking, because they know that, and it's true, you can pick up something here for $5 million, and in 5-10 years you'll probably sell it for quite a bit more and pay the capital gain tax, and it's probably better than money in the bank for sure. So there's a bit of a switch happening where people might be buying for community and for the asset of being, even only part-time residents here. But I think that there's sometimes a danger that we could be killing the golden goose because we're using it more as an asset-based real estate market more than a community. That's the concern. But it's not. Look, it'll have to be very extreme for that to become a long-term problem, because living here is just so extravagantly good. It's hard to make it a problem.
I've certainly always enjoyed my visits over the years. And in fact, I was there just with the kids only in February. We stayed at Lennox Head, and shout out to the Lennox Head Bakery. Very good morning coffee. And the kids absolutely loved it. Super place, particularly the big prawn, actually. So, but the far north coast of New South Wales, of course, so well known for its beaches and natural wonders and the rivers. So, Michael, if people are interested in buying or selling in the region, they want to find out more about your buyer's agency services, where should they go to for more?
My website is pretty simple, www.byronpropertysearch.com.au.
Michael, thank you so much for your insights into Byron and the Northern Rivers region, and look forward to catching up at an event sometime soon.
Thanks, Peter. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Pete's Property Podcast, powered by Buyers. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time as Pete chats all things property with a new guest. And just a reminder that the information provided in this podcast is general advice only and doesn't take into account your personal financial situation or needs. You should always consult a licensed professional to discuss your individual personal circumstances.